So, Dr. Wong, for our audience, I think they'd like to hear a little more details about how the curriculum, ultimately will differ from the traditional curriculum. When I think of the traditional medical school curriculum, I think of a lot of anatomy and biology and physiology and the basic sciences in the first couple years. I've even heard, sort of anecdotally from some students actually, that because a lot of it is lecture-based and classroom-based work, sometimes they don't even come to class. They just sort of study on their own from the book, from the notes, and then they go and take the test because that's basically what they're required to know. So this is much different. I was wondering if you could, in somewhat of a summary or nutshell form, give our audience a little bit of understanding of how the curriculum will differ.
Well, I think your observations are spot on. The curriculum here at University Park is unique in that rather than the students learning be directed and sequenced by the teacher, by the syllabus, by some schedule. Our curriculum here will be driven by this individual student's experiences. And so what that means is that the structure of the content is essentially developed on the fly. That is, we don't know what the students are going to see in their experiences and their exposures, but they will take those exposures, bring them back, and share them in a small group setting. The beauty of this structure is that all of the learning and all of the investigation that goes on by the student is generated from his or her experiences, and the learning is all done in the context of a real life patient. And so what you said about before, about where much learning goes on traditionally in classrooms through lectures that students oftentimes don't attend, all of that learning is really important, but it's not done in the context of a real life person. And so what educationalists have discovered is that you can store that kind of stuff into short-term memory, but it fades very quickly. And if you can tie your learning to something that's linked in context, that there's emotional experience behind it, that will be consolidated in memory and then can be retrieved later on when it's needed. And so it's basically that premise of having the students in experiences that makes this curriculum very unique.
Great. And what about the resources from actually putting this together? So, the traditional curriculum would have faculty who would stand up and give lectures. In this new curriculum, I imagine that the resources required are a little bit different, so that requires a lot of logistics. And also wondering about the ability to scale this. Is this a model that is more hands-on and more one-on-one mentoring to some degree, such that could this really become the norm if successful, or is the scale kind of too big for traditional medical education in mass?
So you ask really good questions, and I don't know that I'll have the answers to either of them in their entirety. The way that we are structuring it right now is that the way that the teachers would interact with the students is quite a bit different. We would have a small number of faculty that meet with students very frequently in these small groups that we're calling inquiry groups. And within these inquiry groups, the learning of all of those basic sciences that you mentioned, physiology, anatomy, biochemistry, as well as the clinical sciences, that is the diagnosis, the treatment, the prognosis, those sorts of things are fleshed out. There are two other pillars in the Penn State College of Medicine that are very important. That is looking at the systems in which these patients are receiving care. So the health system science is also very important. And then there's the humanity of taking care of a patient and the patient's family that's always embarked upon. And so all four of those pillars are discussed through the IQ groups. We perceive, and actually we've tied into the curriculum, the need for having other expertise in those areas going beyond what the individual mentors and teachers would be doing, and tying that into the students' learning is going to be part of the building process for this coming year. I think your second question about scalability is really important. We don't know how that's going to work, but I think to some fashion, the small group setting, the intimate knowledge with which the students and the teachers will become to know one another, I think is going to be really critical for this to work. And I'm not exactly sure how that would go up on a larger scale.
learning, right?
Yes,
As we
I
kind of
think
get
so.
involved.